The clock in the break room read 5:17 when Emily Carter finished tying her hair into a tight bun and put on the name tag that still looked too new on her navy blue uniform. In the narrow mirror, the cold light made her face look paler than she remembered it. She breathed slowly, as she had learned to do in places very different from this one, and mentally repeated the phrase that had become a ritual since her first day at St. Anne's Medical Center. Today, I just need to be useful. Outside, the Virginia Beach emergency room awoke to the constant noise of automatic doors, stretcher wheels, crackling radios, and overlapping voices. The smell of burnt coffee mingled with disinfectant and plastic. Emily walked down the corridor unnoticed. In that hospital, everyone seemed to be in a hurry, with a ready opinion on the tip of their tongue. She walked with a silence that to some seemed like shyness, to others like a lack of assertiveness. "Look who's here, the new shadow," someone said from behind the triage desk. It was Melissa, a veteran nurse in the ward, her smile sharp as a scalpel. "Good morning, Emily. Did you fall asleep standing up again?" Emily returned a short smile. "Good morning. I slept." Melissa looked her up and down as if searching for something wrong with her posture. "Today is Tuesday. Tuesday is accident day and drunk people fighting in parking lots. Are you ready for that, or are you going to just stare with those scared deer eyes?" Emily choked back her words. Instead, she checked the patient chart, organized the clipboards, and went to the supplies room. In places she preferred not to name, she had learned that talking too much was a risk. There, it seemed to be a different kind of sin. The sin of not being funny, not being loud, not being part of the show. When he returned, he heard Dr. Hartman's voice echoing from the trauma clinic. Hartman was a trauma surgeon, famous for saving lives and humiliating people with equal ease. Tall, with always impeccably styled hair and hands that seemed made for command. He was surrounded by 2 residents and a student, and spoke as if lecturing to an invisible audience. "Some people come to the emergency room thinking it's a TV show," he said, pointing to a chart. "The difference is that here the blood is real, and so is the responsibility. By the way, who's the new nurse?" A resident, Dr. Patel, looked in Emily's direction and lowered his voice. "Emily Carter. It started last week. Hartman," and gave a short laugh. "Ah, the silent one. She is calm." Patel tried to be diplomatic. "Too calm. The emergency room isn't a place for people who hide behind silence. When chaos hits, she'll freeze." Hartman spoke loudly enough for her to hear. "Put her in triage. She won't cause any trouble there." Emily felt the skin on her ears grow hot. She didn't look at them. She continued organizing a medication cart, as if each label were more important than the feeling of being small. "Did you hear?" Melissa whispered, moving closer. "He likes to joke around with the newbies. He doesn't take it personally." Emily nodded. "I know." "No, you don't know," Melissa insisted, amused. "Hartman doesn't play around. He tests. Whoever can't handle it, he discards. If I were you, I'd talk more. Smile more. Show that I've got blood in my veins." Emily looked up. "I do." Melissa laughed. "Then prove it." The first patient arrived with chest pain, the second with a sprained ankle, the third with a high fever and a child clinging to its mother's neck. The shift began like any other, and for a while Emily believed she would go unnoticed, as she always did when the world insisted on measuring competence by the volume of one's voice. At 7:42 a.m., a different beep cut through the ambient noise. It wasn't the monitor alarm nor the lab alert. It was the red phone in the trauma room, the one almost no one ever touched. The sound echoed down the hallway like an old warning. Melissa answered, and upon hearing the first sentence from the other end, the color of her face changed. "Yes, sir." "Understood. Repeat, please." She looked at the ceiling as if the ceiling held the answer. Okay, let's get ready." "Yes, sir." She hung up slowly. "What was that?" Patel asked, already approaching. Melissa swallowed hard. "Medevac, Navy helicopter, 10 minutes, patient in critical condition." The corridor seemed to narrow. Hartman emerged like a predator, sniffing blood. "Who's the patient?" Melissa hesitated, as if the information were burdensome. They didn't give a name. They only said it's an operator, and that they need someone specific here. Hartman raised an eyebrow. "Anyone in particular?" Melissa consulted the scribbled paper hurriedly. "They said, 'We need Carter, now.'" The silence that followed was almost comical. "To Carter?" Hartman repeated, as if the word made no sense. "Which Carter? You mean the new one?" Melissa looked at Emily, for the first time, not with irony, with genuine confusion. "Emily, do you know the Navy?" Emily felt the world recede an inch from her body. The sound faded, as if she were underwater. She looked at the red phone, at Hartman's eyes, at Patel's hand holding a pen as if it were a weapon. "Did they just say Carter?" Emily asked, her voice low. "Yes, and one more thing." Melissa looked at the paper again. "They said, 'The helicopter only lands if the SEAL Combat Pro is ready.'" Hartman let out an incredulous laugh. "SEAL Combat Pro? What the hell does that mean? Is this a joke?" Emily closed her eyes for a split second. Inside, an old door opened. The smell of sea and kerosene, the cold metal, the weight of a helmet, and a voice very distant saying, "Doc, look at me. Stay with me." She opened her eyes. "This is no joke." Hartman crossed his arms. "Then explain it, because nobody here understands." Emily didn't want to explain. She wanted to stay in the corner, to be invisible. She wanted the helicopter to change its mind and leave, but when she heard the imaginary sound of the propellers growing in her memory, she knew it wasn't about her. It was about someone reaching the end of their time. "Prepare room 2, she said simply. "Negative pressure, if possible. Airway management equipment, rapid access kit, and call the blood bank." Hartman blinked. "Are you giving orders?" Emily looked directly at him. "I'm asking for what's necessary. If you'd rather waste time arguing, that's fine." The audacity wasn't in the volume, it was in the firmness, and that disconcerted Hartman for a moment. Patel cleared his throat, trying to break the tension. "Let's get ready, Doctor." Hartman shot a hard look at Emily and then at the team. "Get ready. And someone tell me why the helicopter wants a rookie nurse." When the announcement, "Trauma inbound," echoed through the intercom, the emergency room turned into a machine. Stretchers lined up, monitors switched on, ventilators tested. A security guard was assigned to the side entrance. Someone rushed to unlock the helipad door on top of the building. Emily climbed the service stairs slowly, but with a focus that made the air seem thicker. The elevator was full of people and questions. The stairs were empty. With each step, she felt her own body remember an ancient discipline, as if muscles held secrets that the mind tried to bury. On the helipad, the wind was already beginning to shift. The sky was light grey, with a sliver of sunlight trying to pierce the clouds. When the helicopter appeared on the horizon, the sound came first, a roar that made everything tremble. Then the aircraft appeared, descending with precision. The paramedics from the hospital instinctively recoiled. When it touched down, the side door opened and 2 men stepped off with a stretcher. They wore tactical gear under medical jackets, and their gaze swept across the area as if the helipad were hostile territory. "Where's Carter?" one of them shouted bluntly. Emily stepped forward. The man stared at her for half a second. Then something on his face changed, not exactly relief, but recognition, as if a piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. "Doc?" Emily didn't respond to the nickname. Not yet. She approached the stretcher. The patient was a large man, his skin smeared with fresh, dried blood. His face was pale, his lips bluish. He had on an oxygen mask, but his breathing was irregular, as if air was refusing to enter. One of the Navy paramedics spoke rapidly, delivering information. Amphibious insertion training. Controlled explosion went off script. Multiple fractures, possible pneumothorax, internal bleeding. He went into shock. We tried to stabilize him, but he won't let anyone near the wound on his right side. He only asks for you." Emily looked at the patient and saw something no one else there would see. The way his left hand gripped his own vest, not from pain, but from habit of keeping the equipment close. The way his eyes, even, half closed, searched for a way out. The tension in his neck muscles. She leaned in and spoke close to his ear, in a low tone as if telling him a secret. "Mason, it's me." His eyes opened slightly, focused with effort. "Doc." His voice was a whisper. I knew that you weren't going to..." Emily felt a tightness in her chest, but kept her hand firmly on the side of the stretcher. "Stay with me. We're coming. You'll be breathing better in a minute." They laughed at you," he whispered, confused, as if he were mixing up tenses. She hesitated. "You can talk later. Just breathe now." The paramedic beside her, the one who had called her Doc, looked at the hospital staff approaching with equipment. No one touches him without her. Orders from command. Hartman appeared breathless, his hair now tousled by the wind. "What's this story about an order from command? This is a civilian hospital." The paramedic didn't even blink. "With all due respect, Doctor, this man is in the Navy, and he only accepts care from Carter." Hartman turned to Emily, his eyes filled with indignation and disbelief. "You know him?" Emily didn't answer immediately. The stretcher was already moving toward the door. She walked alongside it, holding the IV stand with an unsettling nonchalance. "I served with him," she said finally. "Did it work?" Hartman repeated, almost stumbling. "How?" Emily didn't give details in the hallway. There wasn't room for that. Downstairs, in the trauma room, everything was white light and metal. "Everyone in position," she said as she entered. "Hartman, you lead the surgical procedure once he's stable. Patel, prepare imaging and lab results. Melissa, IV and medication. I'll manage the airway and patient control." Hartman opened his mouth to protest, but the monitor beeped louder, as if reminding everyone that the body of the man on the stretcher didn't wait for hierarchy. Emily leaned forward again. "Mason, look at me. Can you hear me?" He tried to focus. "Yes. I need you to trust me, okay? I'm going to touch your right side. It's going to hurt, but it's going to save you." His fingers tightened around her wrist with surprising force. "Code," he whispered. Emily felt her stomach drop. She understood. It wasn't paranoia. It was practice. It was her way of making sure it wasn't a trap. She answered without thinking, with a phrase that meant nothing to any civilian in the room. "Blue Lantern, Level 3. His grip loosened. A sigh escaped him, and with it a surrender. "Okay, Doc." Melissa's eyes widened. What code is that?" Emily didn't explain. "Now." Chaos took shape. Emily moved with an almost silent efficiency. It wasn't theatrical speed. It was precision. She spoke little, but every word had direction. When someone hesitated, she gave a short command. When someone tried to make a nervous joke, she ignored them. Hartman watched, both irritated and impressed. He was good at what he did, but there was something different about this woman. She didn't seem to be fighting against the chaos. She seemed to have befriended it. At one point, the oxygen dropped and the monitor screamed. The entire room held its breath. Emily leaned over and spoke again into the patient's ear, her voice firm, almost tender. "Mason, stay with me. Focus on my voice." He tried, his eyes glazed over. "You'll feel pressure, then relief," she said, and the team quickly followed protocol. When his breathing improved, the collective sound of relief was like a wave. Hartman swallowed hard, staring at Emily as if he knew her from another life. "You? Where did you learn that?" Emily continued to avoid looking at him. "In places where there were no second chances." Patel, sweating, asked, "Will he need surgery?" "Probably," Emily replied, "but if he goes to the room now without stabilizing, he won't come back." Hartman pressed his lips together. The statement was harsh, but it was true. While the team was working, Emily noticed something no one else had. The Navy man at the door, who looked like a paramedic, had a different kind of radio. And when he spoke, it wasn't to medical control. It was to someone who responded in code. His gaze wasn't that of someone just wanting to save a patient. It was that of someone protecting a secret. "Doc Carter," he said when he found an opening, "the command wants you to know this was no accident." Emily felt her heart skip a beat. "What do you mean?" The explosion was out of the ordinary in a way that doesn't usually happen, and there was someone present who shouldn't have been in the area. We're treating it as a possible act of sabotage. Emily looked at Mason, his face still pale. She knew this team. Sabotage was not a word used lightly. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "The helicopter landed because you were here," the man replied. "But now that you're here, we need you to stay with him until he's in a safe place. There are people looking for him. Outsiders, perhaps." Hartman approached, irritated at being excluded. "What's going on here? You're turning my hospital into a military base." Emily finally faced Hartman. "Doctor, your hospital is already where the consequences arrive. Only today they came by helicopter." Hartman was left speechless. After several long minutes, Mason stabilized enough to go into surgery. Hartman took the lead in the lockdown, but insisted on keeping Emily close, not out of declared respect, but because he realized she was the patient's anchor. In the operating room hallway, as Mason was being carried away, he opened his eyes for a second and looked for Emily. "Doc, don't let them." "I'm not going," she said, holding his hand briefly. "Stay alive, okay?" He tried to smile, but his face turned into a grimace. "You are still quiet." Emily felt like laughing and crying at the same time. "I've always been like this." "No, you choose when to speak. That's more dangerous." The operating room door closed. Emily stood outside, and the hospital suddenly seemed too small for what had just entered it. Melissa approached slowly, as if she didn't want to scare her. "Emily, what exactly were you?" Emily leaned against the wall and exhaled slowly. "I was a combat nurse. In the Navy. SEAL." Melissa choked on the word. Emily nodded. "Assigned as medical support. I wasn't a SEAL. I was the person who went in after they cleared the way. Sometimes I'd go in earlier because someone had stopped. Breathing and time didn't care about protocols." Melissa was silent for a moment. "And why are you here then? In a civilian hospital, earning less, being treated like a shadow?" Emily finished. There was no bitterness in her tone, only observation. "Because I wanted to disappear." The hallway was quiet, except for the distant sounds of surgery. Emily looked at her hands. They were clean, but she saw other colors in them, memories that wouldn't wash away with soap. Hartman emerged from a break room, washing his hands, and stopped when he saw Emily. He seemed different, less performative, more human. "Carter, doctor." He hesitated, as if the next word would be a defeat. "He's important." "He is," Emily replied. "I heard you say it wasn't an accident," Hartman continued. "Is that true?" Emily looked around before answering. "His team thinks it was sabotage, and if it was, someone might try to finish the job." Hartman frowned. "In that hospital?" Emily let out a humorless laugh. "Doctor, do you think danger asks for permission?" Hartman seemed to take that in stride. "What do you need?" "An isolated room after surgery, security, and no one should speak to the press." "We don't have press here," Hartman grumbled. "We have cell phones," Emily replied. He nodded. "I can arrange a room and call hospital security, but if it's a Navy matter, they're going to send people." As if the universe wanted to confirm it, the elevator beeped and opened, and two men, in dark suits and military bearing, stepped out as if they already knew every corner of the corridor. One of them had gray hair, eyes that seemed to measure distance and intention. "Dr. Carter?" he asked. Emily felt her spine straighten automatically. "Yes." The man extended his hand. "Commander Lewis, Naval Investigation. Thank you for being here." Hartman's eyes widened. "Investigation?" Lewis didn't even look at Hartman. "We'll take care of security, and we'll need the doctor with us. She's essential." The word doctor sounded strange coming from him. Emily was a nurse, technically, but in that world, titles changed depending on how someone saved lives. "I'll stay," Emily said, "until he wakes up." Lewis nodded as if it were already decided. "Great. And Dr. Carter, I heard there have been unnecessary comments about you." Emily didn't react. Lewis looked at Hartman for the first time. The look was polite, but cold. "In an operation, Doctor, you learn early on that Underestimating the silent is the quickest way to be surprised. Hartman swallowed hard. I didn't know who she was. Lewis tilted his head. Perhaps that's the problem. Perhaps you should learn to ask less who she is and more what she did. The command left, leaving a trail of tension. The surgery lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes. Emily sat in the hallway, unable to truly rest. She didn't pray like some people prayed, with words. She prayed vigilantly, counting steps, observing faces, paying attention to details too small to justify. Each time someone in an unfamiliar lab coat passed by, her heart tightened. Each time a cleaning cart creaked, she remembered a similar sound in a very different hallway. When Hartman finally came out, his mask around his neck, he looked genuinely tired. He passed. Emily released the breath she hadn't even realized she was holding. Will he be okay? He'll survive, Hartman corrected. Well, that's another story. Significant internal injuries. But they're under control. He needs the ICU. And he needs you. Emily nodded and stood up. In the isolated ICU room, Mason was connected to tubes and monitors. His face was now clean, but old scars were visible like maps. Emily sat beside him, silent. The police officers outside took up positions, and the ICU looked for a moment like an outpost. Hours passed. Emily couldn't tell how many. The world shrank to the rhythm of the heart monitor. Late in the afternoon, Mason opened his eyes. First, slowly, then with effort, like someone returning from a deep dive. He looked around, and upon seeing Emily, his expression softened. "I am here?" he asked, his voice slurred. "You are," Emily replied, "and you're annoying enough to complain." He tried to smile. "You stayed." "I said I would stay." Mason swallowed hard. "They tried." "Not yet." He closed his eyes for a second. "Doc, I heard that you're in a civilian hospital." "Why?" Emily pondered the answer. There were easy versions, but none of them were true. "Because I'm tired." Mason opened his eyes again, looking more intently. "No, you don't get tired. You disappear." Emily felt the blow. She hadn't expected him to see it so quickly. "I needed to disappear. After Arizona." The word fell like a weight in the room. Emily stood motionless. Mason continued, his voice weak. "No one talks, but I know. You tried. And time." Emily closed her eyes. Arizona wasn't a state. It was a code name. A dusty place on another continent. A day when the radio crackled and the world exploded, and she held a body that shouldn't have stopped breathing. "Don't talk about that," she whispered. "I'm not accusing you," Mason said, and there was pain in his voice. "I'm remembering. You saved 9 that day. 9, and you punished yourself for 1. Emily felt her throat tighten. "I was responsible." "You were human," he replied, "and the rest of us, we left you to carry this burden alone." Emily looked out the window. Outside, cars were passing by. Normal people were living normal days. And inside that room, the air still smelled of gunpowder. Before he could answer, an alarm from a distant door beeped. It wasn't a medical alarm. It was a security alarm. Lewis entered quickly without asking permission. "There's a problem." Emily stood up instantly. "There's a man trying to access the ICU with a fake badge. He said he's from the lab, but he's not in the system, and he specifically asked about the military patient in the isolation room." Emily's stomach turned. Mason opened his eyes, suddenly alert, as if the pain had vanished. His body was still attached to tubes, but his gaze returned to that of an operator. "I told you," he murmured. Lewis looked at Emily. "You're going to need to cooperate. Command wants to get him out of here as quickly as possible." "He can't be moved now," Hartman said from the doorway, having overheard. "If they move him today, he'll decompensate." Lewis clenched his jaw. "Then let's turn the hospital into a fortress." Emily looked at Mason. "Do you trust me?" He nodded, his eyes fixed on her. "Always." Emily took a deep breath. "Then tell me what he's carrying. What does anyone want here?" Mason hesitated. I saw the face before the explosion, and I recognized it. It wasn't ours. It was from inside, someone with access, and I recorded it." "Did you record it?" He blinked slowly. In my head. No, somewhere else. Emily understood. You have evidence. Lewis understood as well, and his gaze hardened. So it's not just sabotage, it's betrayal. Emily felt a chill run through her. Betrayal had a specific taste. She had tasted it before. Suddenly a scream echoed down the hallway. A nurse ran over, terrified. He's armed. He pushed the security guard. Lewis left like a shot. Hartman recoiled, pale. Emily stood for a second, frozen in the room, staring at Mason, staring at the tubes. Doc, Mason said, his voice low. If he comes, don't let him take him. Emily felt the weight of an old decision returning. She had no weapon. She had no team. She only had what she had always had, the ability to act when others froze. She walked to the bedroom door, locked it from the inside with the security bolt, and pushed Mason's bed a little away from the entrance. You're going to be quiet, she told him, the phrase stinging with bitter irony. For the first time in my life, I'm telling you to be quiet. Mason let out a short laugh that turned into a cough. Yes, ma'am. Emily picked up the IV stand and positioned it like a cane. It wasn't a solution, it was an intention. The sound of running footsteps drew closer. Voices. A crack, like something hitting metal. Emily stood in front of the door. Emily! Melissa's voice came from the hallway, trembling. He's coming this way! Emily didn't answer. She heard the first impact on the door. Open up! A male voice said from the other end, too restrained. I'm from the hospital. You don't need to. You're not from the hospital, Emily replied, her voice low and firm. You don't even know how to lie calmly. There was a silence, as if the man were assessing the situation. Then he laughed. You're Carter, the silent nurse. Emily felt her blood run cold. He knew. Open it, he repeated. I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want to take what's mine. It's not yours, Emily said. Yes, it is, and I'm in a hurry. The door shook again. Emily looked at Mason and saw his gaze, hard and powerless. Doc, he whispered. Code. If I delete it, tell Lewis Blue Lantern. He'll know what to do. Emily nodded. The third impact was stronger. The bolt creaked. Emily gripped the IV stand with both hands. When the door finally gave way, the man rushed in. He was tall, unshaven, wearing a lab coat over a black shirt. In his hand, a small pistol, pointed at the floor for a moment, and then at Emily. Get out of the way, he said, and his voice was too calm for someone who was violating an ICU. Emily didn't leave. She raised the support as if it were a weapon. He laughed again, impatiently. You're not going to hit me with that. I'll shoot, and that's it. Emily looked into his eyes and saw what she needed to see. He wasn't a passionate killer. He was a professional, and professionals hate surprises. Are you going to shoot a nurse in a hospital full of cameras? She asked. Cameras can fail, he replied, and you can fail too. He took a step. The gun rose. Emily calculated the distance without realizing she was calculating. Her body moved before her mind gave her permission. She struck his wrist with the holster, deflecting the gun toward the ceiling. The shot rang out, deafening, shattering a light bulb. The man cursed. Emily lunged forward again, and this time the metal tip struck his shoulder. He fell against the wall, but he was strong and fast. His free hand gripped her arm and squeezed. The pain came like fire. Emily didn't scream. She twisted her body, using her weight and leverage, as she'd learned in training she'd never told anyone about. The man stumbled, and the gun slipped to the floor. For a second, there was silence. Then the back door burst open. Lewis entered with 2 officers. The man tried to grab the gun, but the officers tackled him. Emily stood still, breathing heavily, her arm aching, her heart pounding as if it wanted to burst out. Lewis looked at the man on the floor, handcuffed, and then at Emily. Are you okay? Emily nodded, her body still trembling. Blue Lantern, she said, gasping for air. Level 3. Lewis blinked, and his face changed. Understood. Hartman appeared in the doorway, pale as a sheet. My God, you fought with him. Emily looked at Hartman, and for the first time her irritation surfaced. "I didn't fight. I protected the patient." Hartman opened his mouth and closed it without a prepared sentence. Mason, lying in bed, let out a tired sigh. "I told you she was dangerous," he murmured. Lewis pulled Emily out of the room for a moment, away from prying eyes. "The guy isn't from the hospital. He's not even military. He's a contractor," which confirms that someone with access paid him. Emily massaged her arm. "And now we'll get Mason out of here quietly, even if Hartman complains." "He can't stand being moved," Emily said. Lewis looked at her seriously. "Dr. Carter, if he stays here, others will come. One contractor failed. They send another. And another. This hospital wasn't built for this kind of game." Emily closed her eyes and for a second saw dust, saw darkness, saw a cold body. She didn't want to repeat it. "Then give me 5 minutes," she said. "For what?" "To prepare him the right way." Lewis nodded. Emily went back into the room. Hartman was there, looking at Mason as if reality had finally overcome ego. "I can't move him today," Hartman said, insisting, but his voice trembled. Emily approached and spoke softly. "You can do it. You're just afraid of making a mistake." Hartman was offended and at the same time seemed relieved that someone had named the feeling. "That's absurd." "Doctor," Emily said, and her tone wasn't aggressive. It was direct. "You're good. But today isn't about being the best in the room. It's about not being the reason someone dies. If you want to help me stabilize him enough to last 20 minutes in transport and leave your pride outside." Hartman stood motionless. Then slowly he nodded. "What do you need?" Emily gave clear instructions, and Hartman for the first time followed without question. Melissa came in and helped. Patel brought equipment. The ICU became a silent choreography. Mason watched Emily with tired eyes. "You came back," he whispered. "I never left," Emily replied, adjusting a monitor line. "I just got scared." "Everyone is afraid," Mason said. "The difference is what you do with it." When everything was ready, the Navy team entered with a special stretcher. Hartman looked at Emily before opening the door. "Carter, Emily, She waited. Hartman took a deep breath. "I misjudged you. I thought silence was weakness. Today I see that it's discipline. And thank you." Emily felt her heart clench, but she didn't let it show much. Learn and move on. The transport happened like a silent robbery. Empty corridors, a reserved elevator, a side door that normally served to unload supplies. The helicopter was already up there again, propellers, spinning slowly, ready. Before they boarded, Mason held Emily's wrist with his still weak hand. "Are you coming?" Emily looked at the hospital behind her. She had a job, a routine, and made an enormous effort to appear normal. And yet, normal had never quite fit her. Lewis approached. "The command wants you along, temporarily, as a medical monitor. Then you decide." Emily looked up at the sky. The wind brushed against her face like a reminder. "I'll go," she said. In the helicopter, the sound was so loud that words had to be shouts or gestures. Emily sat beside Mason, checking his signals, adjusting blankets, keeping her hand close, not out of dependence, but out of presence. Mason closed his eyes and, for a moment, seemed to finally rest. When the helicopter took off, the city seemed smaller. The hospital was left behind like a stage she never wanted, but where, somehow, she had to show who she was. Hours later, at the Naval Medical Center in Portsmouth, Mason was moved to an even more secure wing. Emily stayed outside, signing papers, answering questions, listening to the distant sound of doors that only open with a code. Lewis handed her a glass of water. "You saved him twice today." Emily shook her head. "I was just doing my job." "That's the problem," Lewis said, almost smiling. "Your work is bigger than you've let the world see." Emily looked at her own hands. They were still trembling slightly. Her body remembered. Her mind did too. "And now?" she asked. Lewis pointed to an interview room. "Now, you're going to tell us everything you know about Arizona, about what you saw. about why someone would try to sabotage training and kill an operator. And then you'll go home and rest, if you can. Emily let out a short laugh. Relaxing has never been my strong suit. Lewis tilted his head. Then learn, because this is the part that kills people after the war is over. Emily remained silent. For a moment, she wanted to run away, but she saw Mason through a glass window lying there, alive, and that was enough to stay. The next day, she returned to St. Anne's to collect her things. The emergency room seemed smaller. People seemed quieter when she entered, not because they were afraid of her, but because they finally realized there was a story behind the silence. Melissa ran up to her. "Are you okay?" Emily nodded. "I am. I told everyone that you saved the guy and that there was a shootout and that you hit a man with an IV stand." Melissa spoke too quickly, as if she still didn't believe it. Emily raised an eyebrow. "Of course she told me." Melissa laughed nervously. "Sorry, it's just we never see this. And, Emily, I said things. I was an idiot." Emily looked at her calmly. "You weren't being stupid. You were being human. Just learn." Melissa seemed relieved that she wasn't destroyed. "Are you leaving?" "Maybe," Emily replied. "Maybe I'll stay again. I don't know yet." In Hartman's office, the door was open. He was sitting, looking at a report, but stood up as soon as she appeared. "Carter," he said, and there was no arrogance in his voice. "Emily, I wanted to apologize for what I said, for laughing, for thinking I knew." Emily stood at the door. The request seemed sincere, and that was rare. "You didn't owe me respect," Hartman continued. "You owed respect to the work, and I didn't give it. I turned the team into an audience. And yesterday I saw someone do what I do, save lives without needing an audience. That reminded me why I started." Emily felt something soften inside her chest, very slowly. "Then don't forget." Hartman nodded. "I won't." He hesitated. "And if you decide to stay, I want you to teach. I want you to show the residents what it's like to act under pressure without becoming a tyrant." Emily almost smiled. "Do you want me to teach you?" Hartman returned an awkward smile. "Maybe." Emily looked down the hallway at the sound of an ambulance arriving. Life didn't stop, and, for the first time in a long time, she didn't want to disappear from it. The following week, Emily received a call. It was Mason, the loudest voice. "Doc," he said, and seemed to smile on the other end. "I'm alive, which means I'm going to annoy you for years to come." Emily leaned against the apartment wall, looking at the city through the window. "I accept. Lewis said you went back to St. Anne's. I'm back for now." "You should come here," Mason insisted. "Not for me, for you. They're opening a clinical instructor position. You know how it is. New people come in thinking courage is shouting. You can show them something else." Emily closed her eyes. For a second she saw the helipad. She saw the door bursting open. She saw the IV stand turning into an improvised weapon. She saw the fear, and beneath it, a choice. "I'm afraid to go back," she admitted. "I have it too," Mason replied, and his honesty hurt more than any compliment. "But you know what I've learned? We don't go back to war. When we return, we go back to ourselves, and that's harder." Emily remained silent. Her silence was always full of things. "Yesterday," Mason continued, "the guys were talking about you in the ward. You know what they said? They said you're the scariest combat pro they've ever seen because you don't need to prove anything. You just show up and do it, and then you disappear. But maybe now you don't need to disappear." Emily felt tears welling up unexpectedly. She wiped them away with the back of her hand, annoyed with herself. "I don't know who I am without disappearing," she confessed. "Then find out," Mason said. "And when you do, tell me, because I owe you that, ever since Arizona." Emily took a deep breath. "I'll think about it. In the SEAL team, we don't really like people who think," Mason joked. "And I don't like people who talk too much," Emily retorted. He laughed, a genuine laugh. "Touché, Doc." After she hung up, Emily sat on the sofa, listening to the distant sounds of the city. She thought about the stairs in the hospital, the laughter, the judgments. She thought about the gunshot that shattered the light bulb, the feel of the metal in her hand, the weight of Mason's body being moved. She thought about Arizona and the body she couldn't save. She thought about the way Mason said 9 and 1. She stood up and went to a box stored high up in the cupboard. Inside were things she had never shown anyone. A challenge coin with a trident on it, an old patch, a crumpled photo of a smiling team in an unnamed place. She held the coin in her palm and felt its coldness, as if it were proof that a part of her wasn't made up. The phone rang again. It was an unknown number. "Emily Carter?" a female voice asked. "Try. This is Captain Monroe, Navy Nurse Corps. I received your name from Commander Lewis. We are putting together a training program for civilian medical teams near bases. The idea is to bridge the gap between worlds. Would you be interested in leading this?" Emily closed her eyes. Fate was being irritatingly persistent. "Why me?" "Because you understand both sides," Monroe replied. "And because when things get tough, you don't freeze. You just act." Emily thought about Hartman saying she would freeze. She thought about the door opening. She thought about her own body reacting. "I am quiet," Emily said, almost as a test. Monroe laughed. "That's great. We already have enough noise. We need people who speak up when it matters." Emily felt, for the first time, that her silence could be a place of strength and not of shame. "I accept," she said. When she hung up, she realized she was smiling. A small, almost shy, but genuine smile. Days later, at St. Anne's, Emily entered the training room. Residents and nurses were gathered, some curious, others skeptical. Hartman stood in the back, arms crossed, observing. Emily placed a whiteboard in the center and wrote, in simple letters, "Respect." She turned to the group. "I'm not going to teach you to shout louder. I'm going to teach you to listen better, to see better, to act better. Because one day chaos will walk through the door unannounced. And when it does, what saves you isn't ego, it's teamwork." A resident raised his hand. "You're the nurse the Navy was looking for?" Emily nodded. "And is it true that you fought with a guy armed with an IV stand?" he asked, half incredulous. Emily looked at him, and for a second, the silence in the room grew heavy. Then she replied without drama, "That's true." There was a murmur. Emily pointed to the word on the board. "But if all you take from this is a story to tell at the bar, you've learned it wrong. The point isn't to be tough. The point is to be ready to do what's necessary, with a cool head, without dehumanizing those around you. Not the patient, not the team, not yourself." Hartman, deep down, lowered his arms. For the first time, he looked like a student. Emily took a deep breath. She felt the past still there, like a scar that itches when the weather changes. But she also felt something new, a possibility. The helicopter had come and gone. The chaos had left its mark. But unlike other times, it hadn't disappeared afterward. That night, when she left the hospital, the sky was clear and cold. Emily stopped in the parking lot and looked up, as if expecting to hear propellers again. She didn't hear them, only the wind. She got into the car and, before starting the engine, rested her forehead on the steering wheel for a second. It wasn't tiredness. It was a way of silently giving thanks for being there, for still having a chance. In the rearview mirror, he saw his own gaze. It was no longer the gaze of a frightened deer. It was the gaze of someone who had learned to survive and was now beginning, finally, to learn to live. And somewhere on the other side of town, inside a protected room, an operator named Mason Reynolds slept peacefully for a few minutes, because the silent nurse whom the doctors had mocked had proven once again that her silence was not absence. It was a choice, it was focus, it was courage. And when life demanded everything, she spoke and acted like the combat professional she had always been.